Welcome to Dig Deep, the mining podcast. In this podcast, we go deep into mining news, hot topics, and live interviews with mining professionals and leading figures in the mining industry. Introducing your host, Rob Tyson, founder and director of Mining International and Mining International Executive, a leading global mining recruitment and headhunting agency.
Hi mining community, welcome back to another episode of Dig Deep, the mining podcast. And today we have a special guest, Honourable Shane Jones, who's the member of the New Zealand Government and the Minister for Oceans and Fisheries, Minister for Regional Development, Minister for Resources, Associate Minister of Finance and Associate Minister for Energy. Shane entered Parliament back in 2005 and joined the New Zealand First as an MP in 2017. His educational journey took him from St Stephen's to the Universities of Wellington, Western Australia and Harvard, and has served his country in many businesses and public sector leadership roles during his career. As a proud born and bred Northlander, Shane has always asked the tough questions, identified policy solutions, accelerated implementation in his political life, and has been a very vocal supporter of the mining industry, including the possibility of seabed mining. He very much sees New Zealand's own natural resources as a pathway to economic prosperity, creating regional wealth and jobs. And he's on the podcast today to discuss what the mining industry means to New Zealand, the policies the government have and are looking to implement to make the industry more attractive, and why companies should invest into New Zealand's mining industry, and a lot more. I just want to give a shout out to our sponsors, Hawcroft, who are leaders in property risk management in the mining industry since 1992. They offer insurance risk surveys, construction risk reviews, asset criticality assessments and more. Working across 600 sites globally, Hawcroft supports mining, processing, smelting, ports and rail operations and a lot more. So if you're looking for any property and insurance risk management services, then please visit their website at www.hawcroft.com, and all the details are in our show notes. Minister Shane, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Great to be here, mate, and greetings from the distant South Pacific, New Zealand.
New Zealand, yeah. Really appreciate you coming on the podcast. As we always start these podcasts off, I just wonder if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself. I suppose where you grew up, a little bit about your earlier years, moving through your career, and then obviously moving into government. So I hand it over to you to tell us a little bit about yourself, so the audience knows a little bit about Minister Shane Jones.
Well, I was born in 1959. My dad was a farmer, so I had a classic rural upbringing in New Zealand, and by that I mean a strong dose of the Anglican Church. Through my grandmother, that's the Māori side of me, we had a large degree of exposure to the Māori community life and learnt the language as a boy, and absorbed what you'd call the traditional influences of upbringing in New Zealand. A lot of interaction in the local environment, which meant a lot of fishing, a lot of riding horses, learning how to shoot guns, etc. at the age of 11 or 12 or 13, which was a common practice back in New Zealand farm life. My mum was a school teacher. My nana bought me a thesaurus a long time ago, and I developed a love of language. Not the best student in the world, but a lot of studies at a tertiary level is as much about perspiration as it is about inspiration. Then had a large family. My first wife sadly had passed away. I married again, and with my current wife, Dot, together we have 8 children. 7 of them belong to me, and she has 1 son and I think about 20 grandchildren. So there's a large brood there, and I kind of feel I've done my bit to investing in the future population of New Zealand. And then after a stint of study in America, and I was privileged to win what's known as the Harkness Fellowship, much to the surprise of my own family, I was awarded it, and then brushed up my education, came home, and predominantly been in more in the business sector, but a strong stake in my community, in particular the Maori community. And then washed up in politics at the age of 45 with a very famous former Prime Minister by the name of Helen Clark. And she ran a Labour Party which was before identity politics and climate cultism and transism and various other strange beliefs permeated the left-wing political sphere of a lot of our Western countries. And very strong working relationship with my current boss, which is Winston Peters. He's our foreign minister, a man who first got into politics in 1978. And in 2023, he, in negotiating with the National Party, which is kind of like your Conservative Party over there, they invited me to be the Minister of Resources, which means the Minister of Mining. Although I'd had a profound background in the fishing industry, I'm also, as you put the message out there, I'm a fishing minister. But look, I'm very pro-industry, no nonsense approach. I believe a lot of the climate change hysteria is actually going to wreck Western economies unless we restore some balance to it. One of the great things I've done is, on behalf of the government, is to get rid of the oil and gas ban, and it grieves me to see what's happening in the UK. Many of us have our roots, obviously, in the UK. My own grandfather was a Welshman, and my other line of descent is from Croatia, and obviously a bit of English and the Maori people. So I think you'd regard me as not as voluble as Nigel Farage, but a lot of the policies that our party represents do enjoy similarities with what the Reform Party is going on about in your own economy. So it's probably a reasonable, sketchy version of who I am, mate.
Yeah, no, and it's refreshing to hear that what you've just said, and I wish our UK government takes some note. So I just want to know how your background and obviously upbringing has influenced your desire for regions to take advantage of their natural resources and be actively encouraged to do so.
Well, obviously, the nearest economy to us is Australia, and since the 1960s, people from my broader family have gone across to Australia and worked, and not exclusively, but largely in the natural resources sector. So I come from a background of farming where you have to be very resilient. You don't muck around waiting for permission to be given to you prior to acting. And also, perhaps without even realizing it, I came from a household who had very basic expectations about what a government could do and should do. Education is really important, so to have an inquiring mind. But the older I've got, I've realized the foundational influences of By the Sweat of Thy Brow and continually questioning the wisdom of the state spreading its tentacles, the value of regulation, and the deprecation of self-responsibility. Perhaps without fully realizing it, those were some of the formative influences that surrounded the community I belong to, and yeah, they've come to the fore. Although my critics or my supporters might say, "Oh, Mr. Jones is a late bloomer," but in that late blooming, you can see some of those childhood influences.
What has New Zealand got to offer in the way of obviously resources in the extractive sector? Our audience is global, and obviously people within the South Pacific, Australia, New Zealand and surrounding countries will be aware. But for those that are outside of that, whether in North America, South America, Asia, Europe, just wondered what New Zealand has to offer.
Yeah, so the thing to bear in mind about the Kiwi New Zealand economy, it's about 270 billion US GDP, 270, 280, depending where the dollar bounces around. And recently we developed a booklet, the Critical Minerals List for New Zealand, and we also developed a mineral strategy for New Zealand. And it represents an attempt to restore the minerals industry, the natural resources sector, to a place of pride. Like a lot of other Western countries, it's a sector of our economy that has become stigmatized, and it's attracted a lot of angry, denunciatory attention from these green nihilists and these unicorn-kissing fools who think that we can enjoy economic self-sufficiency without using our own resources. Now, the main resource we have here, which is not exploited, are iron sands. We've got a kind of figurative Sahara desert iron sands resource, largely in the ocean. Gold, obviously we've had a coal industry over the years, but because of climate cultism, that's been driven to the margins of society, although I'm in the business of trying to restore that. And in a variety of rare earth minerals, including antimony, vanadium, titanium. And I think our approach is changing because historically we moved away from exploiting our own resources to an import model. But with geopolitical pressures and logistical challenges, when I took on the role of being the minerals minister, it was really important that I treat it as a proxy for so many other things, mate, that have gone wrong in Western economies. A set of fanciful beliefs that we don't need fossil fuels. Any economy that turns its back on fossil fuels will endanger its economic viability and indeed will compromise its resilience. So we do have an indigenous gas industry in New Zealand. Sadly, a former Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, seizing an opportunity for climate banner waving, prematurely closed the industry down. Well, in terms of future developments, as I said to you, we're reversing that. We've also got new vistas of opportunity, not the least of which is natural occurring hydrogen. But look, these things have been eclipsed because our main foreign exchange earner has been tourism. And after COVID, that is recovering, taking a while. And we're dairy farmers. We're the world leading producers of milk. We've got climate, we've got rain, we've got high quality soils. And we've developed an enormously impressive array of skills, strategies, and deliverables in our dairy industry. Obviously, we're big producers of meat. We have a plantation forestry sector, and we grow what's known as the Monterey pine or the Pinus radiata, a rapid growing tree. It's mature by the time it's 23, 25 years old. We have a very vigorous fisheries and marine farming sector. So those are the areas in New Zealand politics that I've been attracted to, because there's no point squabbling over who is going to enjoy what part of the pie unless you're continually growing the pie. And you can't grow the pie unless you've got an affordable, secure source of energy and electricity. And this obviously is why recently I was up in Singapore on behalf of our government reviving our own indigenous gas sector. So that sort of gives you a flavour of the types of natural resources that we do have. The investors come from Australia, some come from further afield. Obviously, domestic investment as well. But I want to sound a cautionary note. Any economy that races ahead demonises, cancels its fossil fuels industry without an affordable strategy to maintain power and energy at prices that the consumers can cope with, then they are dicing with economic calamity.
Very wise words. Can you explain some of the measures and government policy you've implemented or proposing that will increase and speed up mining and exploration in New Zealand?
In New Zealand, we have arguably the most permissive environmental permitting regime in Australasia, called the fast track legislation. So basically it conflates 8 or 9 statutes together and contemplates a very rapid process for allocating permits. I'm sure it's no different in the UK. Lots of projects are marooned for years, going through pointless, futile, unending processes that don't necessarily improve the quality of the project. In fact, they're likely to worsen its viability. So we passed that legislation last year. It's called the fast track legislation. Obviously, we're reversing the oil and gas ban. We've just established a $200 million co-investment fund. And look, we've been through a 180-degree turn. You know, there's 360 degrees in a circle. And if you go right around, you end up where you were. So we got to 180 degrees, and we said to ourselves, well, to hell with that. We're going back to what we had. So that's quite a major change from an oil and gas ban to reversing it and then creating $200 million co-investment fund to overcome the anxieties that investors have that a government might come along in the future of a different hue and undermine people's investments. I'm very positive about my country, but I have to accept that investors, they make their own minds up about your country and mine. So we need to ensure that we don't unwittingly make it devilishly hard for them to write checks out and get on with developing our resources. We've got a 20% depreciation schedule. So any capital development that you do in the first year, 20% is depreciated. That's not to be sneezed at. We are about to change our regime for foreign direct investment. Some assets are very, very sensitive in New Zealand. Farmland is one of them. Housing is another one. And fisheries. I include fisheries in there for your viewers. It may not be well known, but about 15% of the New Zealand population have as their ancestry the Māori tribes. And they are major owners of the fishing industry. And that makes it a very, very sensitive asset in terms of the schedule of things that you should be mindful of when you're changing foreign direct investment legislation. So, you know, we've taken some pretty radical steps, quite frankly, to unclog the processes and the system. It's attracted quite a lot of controversy. I shouldn't diminish that. But I'm regarded probably as the most pro-development, pro-industry politician in our parliament. I believe in trade-offs, and I don't think that our country can afford a lot of the climate cultism, the unnecessary regulation, and quite frankly, a level of naivety that somehow economic self-sufficiency can be achieved without using our natural resources.
Why should companies, both locally and internationally, invest and do business in New Zealand? And when there's obviously a 3-year election cycle, which could see mining become a dirty word again?
Yeah, well, the thinking behind our $200 million fund is that once the Crown, and that's the term we use in New Zealand to describe central government, once the Crown co-invests and puts genuine cash, capital, into an enterprise, and if there are contracts involved, those contracts are enforceable. So once those changes are made, I think a future government will struggle to repeat the ideological green militancy that sadly we saw in Jacinda Ardern's time.
How do you see New Zealand playing on the world stage in the race for energy and mineral security?
Well, I remember Helen Clark, our Prime Minister, placing a great deal of accent on always defending a rules-based approach to international life. As I said, there's 5 million of us who live in New Zealand. Immigration has tailed off. Our parties are doubting Thomas on immigration. We don't want people who want us. We want people who we need. Now, one thing that I did learn from Helen Clark is that our international reputation as a clean pair of hands is incredibly important in maintaining confidence with trade partners, confidence with fellow travellers. But there's one thing that is even more important than a clean pair of hands, and that's a pocket full of revenue. And I would say to you that a small country like New Zealand, distant from its markets, is easily swayed, because we've been through some massive swings in our politics. We had a bout of Thatcherism in the very late 80s, early 90s. And then we moved more back to statism, where the role of the state through COVID grew enormously. And as our government is correcting our financial situation and getting a better set of navigational bearings to steer the economy where economic matters enjoy greater priority, all of these things reflect the fact that in New Zealand, we need to maintain very strong and cordial relations internationally, but we must be economically sufficient, or we will not be able to afford all of the accoutrements and other aspects that define a modern society and a desirable OECD position of pride.
What is the appetite for New Zealand banks, institutions and pension funds in investing in local mining projects?
So I've recently come back from Singapore, as I mentioned to you earlier, and it's evident to me that the Southeast Asian banks are a lot more pragmatic. And I think it's disappointing that through these UN-driven dictates, major banks in the Western world have become infested by a credentialed elite who use the banking services to impose their luxury beliefs on God-fearing, garden variety New Zealand businessmen and businesswomen. That's why our party has introduced legislation into our House calling for a cessation of those virtue signalling indulgences. Hopefully with the arrival of Mr. Trump, we might see a correction so that the banks move away from being moral arbitrators and just focus on providing credit to credit-worthy enterprises. So it's fair to say that a number of our banks have shunned the minerals sector, have got very, very harsh attitudes towards the coal sector. Now, look, that's not to say that we're ignorant of the fact that the coal industry does create a lot of negative externalities. But we should trust in science and technology as well. The way in which coal and gas are used nowadays is vastly improved in relation to some Dickensian view of former times that was going to lead to insufferable pollution. The social license requirements now in New Zealand to maintain business momentum are such that we should be able to continue to use, where necessary, these fossil fuels. And as long as I'm around as the Minister of Mining, we will be.
Is there a place for mining for clean, green New Zealand?
Well, I think the world's about to move into the extractive era. In order to create the clean, green technologies, services, gadgetry, and other capital needs, we will require rare earth critical minerals. Now, you either import them, and you're probably importing them from locations that have worse environmental standards, weaker human labour standards, and arguably worsening your own self-sufficiency if you're totally dependent on those locations. Just look at what's happening between China and America. Mr. Trump announced about a week ago that there was a breakthrough in his negotiations with China over trade matters, including a resumption of trade, because China has such a large grip on important green minerals. So I do believe that we can have sustainable mining in New Zealand within guardrails that do not compromise the international image we have as a clean, green, nirvana surrounded by beautiful beaches, alpine scenery, and a variety of other fantastic images that we do beam around the world.
What would you, I suppose, what's the biggest misunderstanding people have about the mining industry in New Zealand?
Well, it's really a part of the cancel culture. I think mining, and it's not just in New Zealand, but we are a cautionary tale. Let's face it, from time to time, the mining sector around the world has ended up leaving a legacy of negative environmental outcomes. But we can't live our lives incarcerated by the mistakes of the past. No one enjoys a perfect history. So what we've got to do is ensure that mining as it goes forward is strongly defended, but it operates within an envelope of acceptability. And where there are trade-offs to be made, politicians should make those trade-offs. I don't believe that judges should make those trade-offs, and I certainly don't believe that the Greenpeace activists should make the trade-offs either.
A question that's probably more of a personal question, and especially people here in the UK. We were obviously speaking offline about what's happened here in the UK. Just wondering if you had any advice that you could give our Labour government who are currently in power, because it just seems everything is against the people, against businesses. And obviously you're pretty outspoken. I just wondered if there was any advice that you could give our Labour government in what they're doing and carrying out.
Oh, look, I've got to know some of your politicians over the years because I joined the Golden Oldie parliamentary rugby team. And from time to time, we've been over to the UK and played. And look, we're the inheritors of fine British traditions in New Zealand. Contract law, our parliamentary democracy, our adherence to the tenets in the Magna Carta back to King John, the Bill of Rights, the 1688 Bill of Rights. All of that was imported into as the colony grew here in New Zealand. Indeed, we eventually created our own parliament. And I'm the first to admit each society has its pressure points and stresses. I do feel, however, that no economy can defend itself unless it's generating an economic surplus. And one of the major handicaps is the affordability of energy and power. That saps the ability to invest, the ability to grow. And the challenges that Prime Minister Starmer and others have, they're not alone in that. But here in New Zealand, I've decided to focus on economic resilience, and it does attract criticism. I gave a speech late 2023, and the tagline in the speech was "Bye Bye Freddie." Now, sadly, it was misconstrued. I was talking about frogs having more primacy in economic development and mining than families and jobs and communities, and that people then viewed what I had to say as the decimation of the remaining frog family. That didn't actually reflect accurately what I was saying. I was saying, no, we're not going to kill Freddie the frog. He's just going to be in the departure lounge while we get on and save the economy. And I guess my advice to anyone in my career, in my walk of life in politics, is that pick a target, pick a message, and run with it, and back yourself to manage the risks associated with it. But for a Kiwi New Zealand politician to advise Westminster, I'll be reminded very quickly, now look here, Mr. New Zealander, stay in your lane and less is more.
What's the outlook for New Zealand's mining industry over the sort of short, medium and long term that will shape the future of the country?
Well, obviously skills are important, human capital. I'm confident that we will attract lots of New Zealanders once it grows in size and gathers momentum. They'll come home from Australia. It's really important that our universities, our tertiary institutions of an educational character refocus their efforts and put more accent on practical training for the industry. It's important that we also ensure that the providers of capital don't drift off and start making arbitrary moral judgments about the mining sector. But the most important thing in our country that the mining sector has got at the moment is a government, starting with our Prime Minister and the leader of the ACT Party, Mr. David Seymour, and my own chief, Mr. Winston Peters. We are not going to be shouted down. We are not going to be intimidated by the voices who continually catastrophize what mining does, what mining represents in terms of their very bleak views about our future. So there'll be no cancel culture where I'm concerned. There'll be no people with their shrill green nihilism trying to undermine and close down a sector that we desperately need. And for as long as I'm around, mate, we're going to have it.
And lastly, I suppose looking at the world stage from a mining perspective, what would you like to see other governments around the world do and change? And I suppose looking at some of the policies that you're implementing in New Zealand within the mining industry, what would you say to other governments in obviously around the world? What would you like to see them do, and around policy changes that you've implemented in New Zealand?
Well, I think that a lot of our English-speaking Western democratic countries have fallen victim to regulatory confusion, and we have disconnected the nature of the risk from the regulatory response. And anything that the state does, it has to be proportionate to the risk, and the risk should be informed by economic rationalism, decent science, and technological innovations. And we've got to stop turning climate change into a set of religious creeds. The approach that New Zealand is taking is one of adaptation. Well, to adapt and improve the quality of life and technology, you need to constantly upgrade the equipment, the skills, and all of the other inputs. And to do that, if you're not growing it, you're digging it up. And I think it's just quite extraordinary what's happened with a lot of comparable nations. And in our case, we're a government that said, right, that's enough. We're having a 180-degree turn. That does not mean that we're ruining the environment. That does not mean that we are going to allow investors carte blanche to do what they like to our waterways or our land. They will operate within guardrails, but we're not going to have those sectors demonised, stigmatised, or trivialised by misinformation and imagining that every time you hear a story that things haven't quite worked out, that is the only way that your future is going to turn out. So in that sense, I'm studying very carefully what changes are going to emerge in the United States after the arrival of Trump. And, you know, I came back recently from Canada, a profoundly large nation, and even up there, the investors were sharing with me how they desperately need a fast-track set of legislative processes to revive and grow various parts of their mineral sector. And I only hope that in New Zealand that we get the dividend, which is jobs, a greater sense of pride and resilience, self-sufficiency, but most importantly, that the contributions which I'm making on behalf of our government broaden the capacity of the economy to generate the necessary financial returns so we can afford all of the services that modern citizens demand of the state.
Minister Shane Jones, thank you very much for taking the time out your busy day to come on the podcast. It's a refreshing discussion, and I wish you well in your endeavour and with your policies that you're looking to implement, and really appreciate your time. Hopefully you can maybe able to come on the podcast maybe in 6 or 9 months or even a year's time and give us an update on some of the implementations that you've made.
Thank you very much, mate, and best luck. And Godspeed with you and your audience. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you very much, Shane.
Bye.
Hope you enjoyed that episode. Appreciate your continued support. Please keep sharing these episodes far and wide. What a great episode here from the Minister Shane Jones of New Zealand. And hopefully other countries around the world will adopt some of their policies that they're adopting in New Zealand within our mining industry. Appreciate your time. Thank you for listening. And until next time, happy mining.
Thank you for listening. Remember to reach out to Rob via the show notes and be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, happy mining, helping each other to improve the mining industry.